Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's a rock and roll business Monday. We've had Gary Sass, the money man. We've had Paul Mahales, who's got one of the coolest projects going in Rhode Island. And back from snow-ridden Montana, Mr. Innovation, Saul Kaplan. Welcome back.
Glad to be back. I'm just still, it's summertime here.
Yeah, so about 10 days ago, we were together at the BIF Summit, and it was a remarkable 2 days.
Thank you. I'm still reeling from it. It was such a beautiful way to showcase Providence and Rhode Island. We had people here from locally, but we also had people from around the world who were just blown away by the area. We had the right conversation because we were talking about innovation and entrepreneurship, and these folks who came here to Rhode Island, that's what they saw, that's what they felt at the summit. So guess what, they go back, to their homes and they talk about, that they saw here. And it's a fantastic positioning for our place. Couldn't be more proud to host it. Of course, the 2 days were incredibly inspiring, and now we get the opportunity to capitalize on the connections and collaborations. So it's all good.
For those of you who may not have seen it, but we broadcast it live for 2 days, and it's as the most interesting event that I think. I think the only thing that reminds me of is when Brown used to do the big events every year, and they gave it up for Lent or for whatever reason, but brought in just sort of national interesting people and did a themed week on a big issue, cities or welfare or whatever it was. But the diversity of the presenters was so remarkable. Overflowing crowd, 500 plus people. And who was your favorite?
People ask me that.
Oh, come on, cough it up.
I had so many of the stories but I'm going to tell you my favorite thing about this is not the stories, which by the way, for those of you listening to this, that say, what the hell are they talking about? Every one of those stories, we're in the process now of completing the video of it, and we'll be putting them up on the site for free, so you can go back and listen to all these stories. 32 incredible stories, that just inspire you, just touch you. They just really touch your heart, because what we're all about is how do we tie heart to a business model to actually change the world, right? To change education, to change healthcare, to change everyone's business model, and people are incredibly inspired by it. But I'm most taken by the audience, by the messages I'm getting now every single day from people, that 2 weeks later are still, ranging from, we're going to change the world in my organization, to those people who say, I'm going to quit my job because I'm so inspired. I got to go find a different thing to do. But there were so many incredible stories. Though I tell you the one that that hit me the hardest. I always loved when we put our youth on the stage. So we had a local student, Talik Tillman, who goes to the Met School. He's a senior at the Met School, who shared his own personal story about identity, and just sent a message to all of us to help us rethink the way we think about equity, inclusion, and social justice in such a powerful way. I actually took him with me to Montana.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Like, I literally took this kid, Talik, with us to Montana and spent another week with him, and he had the same impact on people from around the world at this conference I was at, called Hatch in Montana, and that just really touched me, because Talik blew them away.
That's great.
Inspired them like he did us on the BIF stage, and now his connections, and his confidence, this kid's going to change the world, and I'm just so grateful for it.
I think the one that did not leave a dry eye in the house was the mom with her.
Oh my goodness!
Autistic
AJ
artist son.
and her son Devin. What a beautiful story. No, all of our stories. I always say, people cry at an innovation conference. It's like, who cries at an innovation
Yeah,
conference? And we were all like so touched by these stories, but they really convince you that we can change the world. They're optimistic. Let's roll up our sleeves. Yeah, it's a mess around us, for sure.
Are you looking out the window at the street here? That has been in
it's a
turmoil.
mess around us.
Thank you, DOT, or
but locally and globally. But this is a room full of people who don't admire the problem. We know there are problems. Let's get over that. What do we have to do to fix them? How do we work together? How do we combine our superpowers to change the world for consumers and for citizens and students? And so you can tell I'm still a little wired
absolutely.
Up from the experience.
No, it's great. Let's jump over to, not that I want to leave BIF, but we'll start previewing next year's BIF probably next week. Let's just jump over to Amazon and HQ2, the Powerball of economic development
everybody wants to go for it.
Right, and one frustration I think here, and I think it's a missed opportunity, is building up some excitement about even participating. And I don't, listen, if Rhode Island goes for it, we don't know if Rhode Island's going for it, it's indeterminable, and we fail, we've done a whole bunch of good work anyways, because we've put together people and we've identified opportunities and we've just gotten smarter about ourselves. A lot of cities are really pulling people together and sending them out to Seattle. We don't seem to be doing, or at least if they are, they're not telling anyone, we don't seem to be doing any of those things. Is that a missed opportunity to kind of create the energy?
I know that they're mobilizing to go after it. But your question about how transparent is it, and is there an opportunity to engage us, to engage citizens in the process, so that whether we win or lose, we went through a positive process about how do we position ourselves, what's our brand promise for Rhode Island, and how do we deliver on that. So on that dimension, I would agree with you. I think there's a lot more we can do, but let's stay focused on could we position ourselves for the deal, regardless of what that
let me add a
like.
little thing. We're a cynical bunch. Right? We have 38 studios. Gary was just on. We were talking about the paw socks and the danger of cynicism. Even if you went after it and got into the final rounds and might be in the game, if it's not a public process, are people going to feel comfortable giving $400 million of incentives to Amazon if you don't include people?
I'm all about the transparency and less push from the top down and more pull from the citizen the other way.
Right.
So I'm always going to err on the side of let's engage our citizenry, in shaping our story, our brand, and we've seen lots of examples here when you don't do that. The price that you pay. So of course I agree with that. So again, I would stipulate that, but I still think it's interesting to say how do we position ourselves, regardless of how inclusive the process is. But you're right. In the end, there's no way we get positioned without a pretty significant boatload of incentives that would have to be put on the table, and you don't do that with citizen support without engaging citizens. So absolutely, I would encourage more transparency about it, win or lose. Are we playing? How are we playing? How can we help shape that offering? For the offering itself, I think I've said here with you on Go Local, that I think we should be connecting regionally, and getting a lot more critical mass around the story that we share with them. And Rhode Island should be delivering its unique component of that, as opposed to thinking that we're going to win that on our own, or that anybody in New England is going to win that on their own. And so that's a tough thing to do, because we have political borders and elections are held locally, and anything you do to kind of combine your efforts and your talent pools and your incentives across borders is easy for me to say and hard to do. I still think that's the right strategy here, and I hope that that's what's happening behind the scenes, where there are conversations going on about how do we draw a line around a regional economy, because that's the way the economy works anyway, whether there are political borders or not. The way the labor pool works how many people do you know that live here and work there, or live there and work here where there are opportunities? We should be shaping a much more powerful proposition and offering around the region. So I really hope that that's happening. I hope the part that we're positioning ourselves for is around Rhode Island is a unique place for innovation at scale, that we're using our size to say, look, Jeff Bezos, we know you're about constantly playing with the next business model, the next way to deliver value to consumers. Let us tell you about how Rhode Island is unique compared to other places around our ability to do that. You can imagine a different way to serve customers here. You can very quickly put it onto the real world ground. You can prototype it and test it. And then your message to Jeff Bezos is when you explore those business models here in Rhode Island, when they start to work and get traction, then you're off to the races nationally and globally at spreading that. We're the safe place to get ideas off of the whiteboard and onto the ground. That should be our pitch. Everything we do here should be around how do we position ourselves that way to sell it, to deliver on that promise. And I think that that's a unique proposition, a selling proposition that we can deliver on. We've got more work to do to be able to do it, but if I had the opportunity to talk with Jeff Bezos or the Amazon team, that's the way I'd be pitching Rhode Island.
It appears, at least from the media coverage in other cities, that the level of energy, and I'm going to use engagement again, collective teamwork that's going on is just ferocious in some cities.
I mean, they did a very smart thing. I mean, they've been incredibly inclusive. They were very, they were strong around, this is not a shoe-in for any one place. We're not going to come out of the chute and say it's between three places. I mean, how smart is that? When you're trying to increase your political footprint and engagement.
Well, think about it. But by the way, the brilliance of the free PR. I mean, this is Willy Wonka on the Chocolate Factory brilliant of the golden ticket.
And encouraging everyone to play and to compete.
And learn about Amazon. I mean, you've got every decision maker in every urban footprint in the country. Just
very, very smart on their part to position it that way. And so therefore you can see everybody is taking that bait and trying to put their story together. Now, of course, it'll get winnowed down, and then they'll have to get to the more traditional, it's between these three or four, and then there'll be the dance contest to how to get there, which is why I come back to, you better play the game regionally, because to think that you're going to be in the final dance contest with our scale and our ability to deliver on the number of jobs and the amount of talent they're looking for, I think is a big stretch for us. But I think we've got something really important to say that's very strategic to the way they operate and what they want to do. We just got to get much tighter about how we sell that.
One of the key parts of Go Local is our ability to buy certain services on a very discounted rate. And this morning at 8:22, I was at Benny's for the 40% off sale.
I saw your post.
Yes.
I saw your post.
I was there at 8:22.
So how crowded was it?
It was getting crowded. It opened at 8. I was there at 8:22, and there was some other insightful business leaders looking for opportunities to make significant acquisitions to enhance their companies as well as I was. It was very melancholy, to be perfectly honest. The sales staff, I mean, I recognize the woman who was working the cashier, and I literally have seen her for 30 or 40 years of my life. She literally was on the verge of almost cheering up.
Must be incredibly emotional to the people who work there. I know it is to us as customers there. But listen, so they have a 40% closeout sale. I think you're right. That's sad, just the smell of a closeout sale. But yet, guess what happens? Everyone comes out of the woodwork. Not because of the emotion of Benny's. I mean, you went there because you were looking for a deal.
No, I went there because of Benny. Honestly, I wouldn't have gone to somebody else's.
Because it was Benny's you went.
Yeah, it was because of.
Well, most people go there because when they see a closeout sale and they see 40%, they're looking for a bargain and they don't want to miss out on it. And what's the irony of that? Like Benny's fills up now when they offer 40% off. The customer base wasn't there. When you couldn't get 40% off, and it goes back to the Amazon story again, right? Unless you're able to offer people a value compared to other ways they can get the identical product,
Correct.
or you're delivering a service that you can't get another way, it's just not sustainable, which is why Benny's is now closing in the first place, right?
But it's not just Benny's. We were driving, coming out of Newport yesterday, and noticed on that commercial area in Middletown as you're coming out, a couple more retailers, couple more stores vacant, some of the older ones that haven't been filled in the past couple of years. When I emailed you this morning, in 5 years, are we going to have a Route 2?
Yeah,
Will there be anything left there?
Well, think about how many Route 2s there are around the country.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So, but let's use Route 2 here locally. So this was the way local economies developed, and they cleared out, and put these big boxes, strip malls, became the anchors of economic development in these spaces, and now retail is getting decimated. So now what happens to that real estate? What happens, to all the capital that's tied up there? What happens to, in some cases, wastelands of parking lots, that
restaurants,
feed them and surface parking,
yeah.
And whatnot? What happens to the restaurants when there's not as much economic vibrancy around them? So, so you can look at this, as a double-edged sword. You can look at it as what are the implications of that for the people who work there, for the people that have invested there, but you can also look at it as the optimist to say, let's not be the last place in the country that reimagines the purpose of this geography and repurposing what happens. Why should we wait until it's a wasteland of surface parking? Like, what are the new ways to use that real estate? What are the new ways to use that infrastructure? I mean, Route 2 itself isn't going anywhere,
right.
But what's going to happen is we're going to look back on this 20, 30 years from now, and hopefully we're going to see a whole nother generation of economic vitality, but it's going to look and feel very different. The problem is the pain of getting from A to B, that is always the case. And if we wait too long, to get from A to B, right, that's how you get disrupted, and that's the most painful part of it. It'd be much better to experiment and explore other uses so that you're in a position to reinvent yourself, whether it's you personally or your business or our community and the geography. So if we make that mistake, just like we've made the mistake of hoping the industrial economy's coming back,
right.
And we're living with the transition and the pain of that, the same thing is true on Route 2.
Right.
If we wait until it happens all over the country and all of those places go out of business, and all of those facilities are mothballed, it's going to be incredibly painful. It already is starting to be painful. The question is, what do we do about it proactively to reinvent it? It's a small state. We don't have a lot of geography, right? Whatever the new economic activity is, why aren't we leading instead of waiting for it to cause pain for ourselves?
Are we not big enough, though, to take on, talk about it, we have a DMV, California has a DMV.
Right.
And the top part of the DMV is about the same, right, regardless. And you have to think through, and you have to invest in the computer system to support it, and whether the computer system does 1 billion transactions in a year or 10 million transactions in a year, it still needs to have that same vibrancy. Are we just not big enough to take on multiple complex issues simultaneously?
We are not big enough to play the game the way everyone else is playing it, and then, because it costs us more because our scale isn't big enough. That's a losing strategy. We need to be about what's next. Rhode Island, state motto should be what's next. And we should be proactive. We should be the place in the country that's figuring out what to do with Route 2, figuring out what's next for DMV, instead of looking like everyone else but at a smaller scale where the fixed cost kills us. The tax rates are too high, right? Why aren't we reinventing the way DMV works and then letting everyone else in the country come to Rhode Island and say, maybe we should be following what Rhode Island does. Instead, we're the last one to make the change, and we deal with all the pain of that and the higher cost structure. So this is all about innovation and entrepreneurship and being about what's next, instead of waiting for these trends to hit us where we don't have the scale to play and compete with larger places.
Retail seems to be the perfect space to start thinking about. We just got a wake-up call with Benny's, obviously, on Friday. Toys R Us announced that they were going into bankruptcy, and lots of business ramifications coming out of that, suppliers balking at wanting to play in their sandbox and their Chapter 11, and we're going into the Christmas season, and the largest toy retailer in the country is in complete upheaval. How do we take it on? Does it always have to go through commerce or a governmental function, or could it begin to actually transpire? Is that a role for the legislature to name a commission, or should it be taking place out of a collection of all of us in business getting together and having that conversation?
Well, I think it's all of us. I don't think it's just the public sector's responsibility or the private sector's. I don't think it's just citizens. We all have to have a shared view. We're going to be about what's next. Mm-hmm. We're going to put in place ways for us to start imagining what's next, and we're going to start getting ahead of other places because we have an advantage. This is where being small helps us, right? We should be able to get to what's next more easily and faster. Right. When we adopt that here and we start to identify ourselves with, hey, we're about what's next. Us as individuals, your company, Route 2, like everything should be the mantra of what's next, and we start actually doing it. That's when we're going to change the game here in Rhode Island. That's when other people are going to start paying attention to what we're doing because everybody's struggling with this. Right. So if we take advantage of our size, we have a real compelling strategic advantage. But we just need to align around that. And how does that start? It starts by people believing it. It starts by people looking for easy things to do. I always say, think big, like big, bold idea like that, right. Like repositioning a whole state. Right. Start small and then scale fast. But in every example you and I talk about every single week, we are always sitting there like everyone else around the country dealing with the pain of the changes that are happening. And if I said to you, where are we around what's next? Why isn't our DMV process the what's next? So that other people will look at us as the model.
Will we start to see, and we just saw it last week in London, will we start to see government regulatory agencies start to rebuff innovation because it's moving too fast, it's taking away too many jobs? London knocks Uber out of the park, and Uber's now out of London. So could we see that start to take place of people saying, wait a minute, no more Airbnb, no more Uber, no more Amazon. If you want to buy something from Amazon, you want to buy something online, the sales tax is going to be 2x, not 1x.
Well, I will tell you the lean against, like putting legal and regulatory moats around innovation. Number one, it's not going to work. It's not going to work in London. It's not going to. You can try it. It might delay the inevitable for a little while. But if you're Rhode Island, right? It really doesn't work. If you have a lean against strategy, which a lot of people would imply from the way we operate, like, can you innovate here? Are we really about what's next?
The guys over on Fountain Street are demanding that news can only be read on printed pieces of paper. Right.
Good luck with that. Well, but you can see where I'm headed because that's a losing strategy. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's a losing strategy everywhere. But in Rhode Island, that's particularly a losing strategy. Because if your strategy is never mind what's next, we're going to lean against it. We're going to slow down what's next from coming here to Rhode Island, right? But good luck with that strategy. We already are in a world of hurt around trying to block innovation. We should be all in on innovation. And when people come to us with a new idea and the incumbents here lean against, we should have our leaders saying that's not in the best interest of Rhode Island. It's not consistent with the positioning we want.
But is that the natural reactive? I mean, we saw
of course not.
The reactive. I mean, we saw it with Trump getting elected, Brexit. We see these series of things in which people are being left behind. Right. They had middle class jobs. They had middle class incomes. Their children did better than they did. There was this succession that took place, and now those old rules don't necessarily carry forward. They blew up in 07, 08 with the Great Recession, and Brexit be damned, these other things. The damage of innovation sometimes for some people far outweighs what the benefits are.
Well, the worst strategy you can have is one that's stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? So you either celebrate innovation and you create the conditions and make sure we're not putting in place laws and regulations that stop it,
Right.
and you go all in and you differentiate yourself, right? Or you go all in on, we're gonna put moats around our state and we're gonna prevent it, and you lean against it as well as you can. You can tell I'm biased.
Right.
I don't believe that works. I do not believe for a second that strategy is gonna work. Doesn't our history suggest that?
Well,
We
listen,
were the
we're-
center of the economy here. Just let's go to Slater Mill and broadcast one day,
Right.
right? And actually tell the story of, at one point in this state's history, we were the center. We were what's next. All the economic activity, all the companies, all the jobs, all of our education programs were all lined up, all integrated to make us like one of the most powerful parts of the economy, even though we're a small, dinky state. And now we got to figure out, what's our North Star for Rhode Island? What's our competitive advantage? And I'm going to keep coming back to, you got to turn our small size into a strategic weapon. And you got to learn how to have that conversation when Jeff Bezos walks in. Because if you think you're going to compete with bigger states, right, because you're going to do what they do better, you better be about what's next, because Jeff Bezos is all about what's next. And you better play to that.
Well, last week we had the former Prime Minister of Ireland on Skyping in,
Oh, really?
and he was talking about, listen, the big growth, the explosion in Ireland is taking place because England decided to some degree, break out of the EU. Huge amounts of financial institutions are moving to Ireland because they want English and they want to
Right.
be part of the EU, and they're going to take advantage of it.
Right.
We were there a couple months ago. There was, you could not look in the sky in Dublin without seeing multiple cranes. It was the most, exhilarating, remarkable, and wildly jealous thing you could ever see. A city just exploding in economic development
and
instantaneously.
they did a lot of things right in terms of creating the conditions, but I think the interesting part of that story is they learned along the way. You have to be differentiated. So the original stuff they did created some tax advantages,
Yeah.
gave them some near-term wins, but they haven't sustained it the way they have with that alone.
Yeah.
They've done some other things. And so your point before about, isn't it more comfortable, to keep the status quo in place, and have everybody feel good about the status quo? Yeah, that might be more comfortable, but the truth is more and more people are being left behind, both here locally and nationally.
Right.
And so you've got to approach the uncomfortable, right? But what you have to do is make the uncomfortable, what's next, easier and safer to manage, which is why our size comes into play. You never bet the farm on a big transformational change. You need a place to model it, right? You need to see if it works. You need to work the kinks out of it, right? We should be all about, how do you do that, and can we mobilize our community to do that? And you made this point earlier. It's not just the public sector versus the private sector,
Yeah.
or the colleges, versus the hospital. We all have to have a shared North Star, and then figure out how we can all contribute to it. And we better do it in a way that engages everybody in that,
Yeah.
right? Because this is not something you're going to push in. You have to pull it out of our capability set and our talent pool and our institutions. And the good news here is that Rhode Island has a lot to build from, a lot to be proud of, a lot of talent. People love to live here. You've got great universities here.
Right.
We have so many assets to be about what's next if we could just get better alignment. I often say, give me 1 or 2 clicks on a collaboration meter, right, with a common shared purpose,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
could change this place.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Saul, thank you so much.
Always a
glad
pleasure.
you are back, safe
I'm
and
back.
sound.
Love it.
Good
to be home.
Glad you're wearing your snowshoes all the way in here on this 80-degree day. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.